Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast.
Cybersecurity affects us all, so join us as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world.
Hello and welcome to the show, Cybersecurity Where You Are. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO here at the Center for Internet Security, joined by the host with the most, the Hall of Famer, the difference maker, Mr. Tony Sager. Tony, how are you, sir?
Great, Sean. Great to be back.
Thank you. Also joined by Ed Skoudis, president of the SANS Technical Institute, founder of Counter Hack Challenges, the godfather himself. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate your kind introduction.
Thank you. And as this is a celebratory episode, 200 episodes, Tony, we made it to 200.
Unbelievable.
We've brought in a co-founder and initial chair of CIS, Mr. Frank Reeder. Frank, how are you, sir?
Just great. Delighted to be in this company.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So, Tony, you know, we go down the path. I call you our chief historian for CIS, but for listeners that are new to CIS, you know, how would you describe CIS, what it does, our mission, why that mission matters, and especially when we're thinking about today's threat landscape? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, just a couple of things. You know, CIS, this is my second career, right? First 35 in the federal government doing this kind of stuff, and then ever since associated with the Center for Internet Security. And we're one of the industry's leading cybersecurity nonprofits. And we're the only one that I'm aware of that has these two complementary missions. One is the production and sharing of security best practices, and that has a worldwide footprint. That's what the company was founded upon. And the idea was to have a way to bring together the best technical expertise in the industry, create the content that we all need. At that time, it was around what's the security optimal way to configure basic pieces of information technology, a desktop, a web server, a mail server, and so forth. Create that as a community product, give it away to the world, and support it with a small nonprofit company. Added later on in history, about 10 years later, was the operational mission. That is the support of state, local, tribal, territorial governments 24/7 with an operational mission. Many of you live that world of incidents and attacks and response and recovery and all that, and we do that at the scale of thousands of state, local governments. And so bringing those two together really provides a powerful model for CIS and a really unique contribution to the security of the ecosystem.
Definitely. And it's, since 2000, really when CIS became CIS. And Frank, this is, the Cosmos Club. And, Tony's told me this story many times. And there's been, a number of elements, really defining moments in CIS's history that shaped what it has become today. So from 2000, as you were there as a co-founder and as initial chair, any thoughts you have about those defining moments that you've seen in CIS's history?
Well, I can think of at least three. The first is the one that you described. As usual, and we'll get to this a bit later, I think Alan Paller said, is there a way to get smart people together to think about how we can create a mechanism to share security best practices? And out of that grew the dinner that our late colleague Ramon Barquin hosted at the Cosmos Club. Little sidelight, it was a hot August day and the air conditioning went out, but notwithstanding that, 30 really smart people got together and decided that there were three large questions that needed to be addressed. One was, what do I need to do? What are the best practices for securing my technology? The second was, how much is enough? What constitutes, in insurance terms or in legal terms, due diligence? As my colleague Tony would, I'm sure, say, total security is an interesting and aspirational goal. And the third was, whom can I trust to advise me on how to do these things? We were living a little bit in the Wild West where lots of people claimed to have solutions, and there was no way for organizations to judge the quality of the advice they were getting. The second inflection point was the day we actually turned cash flow positive. We started on a line of credit from our patron Alan, and my weekly calls with Clint Kreitner usually were first about how far are we from going off the cliff, and what are our plans for shutting down. And sometime in that first 6 months, we actually turned the corner, and the conversation turned to things other than cash flow. A third important inflection point was the point that Tony made, the addition, if you will, of the second mission or line of business. When as many of you may recall, or perhaps not, some of us are a little older than others, in the wake of 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security, among other things, established a strategy of creating information sharing and analysis centers by sector. I think a very wise move, because there are a lot of commonalities that are useful if you think of the challenges from a sector perspective. Transmission pipelines have very different challenges from airlines, for example. And the state of New York volunteered initially to host the multi-state Information Sharing Analysis Center. Politics changed things, and political priorities changed, and the state of New York decided, a new governor decided, or I should say asked, why am I hosting a national utility? And fortunately, our good friend Will Pilgrim was running the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center as the CISO for New York State. I'm looking for a home, and a fortuitous move occurred, and as a consequence, the second line of business, actually providing, if you will, operational intelligence to users, became the second leg on the stool of what is now CIS. I'm sure there are other important inflection points, but those are the three that come to mind.
Fantastic. Tony, any thoughts there as our chief historian?
Actually, I was going to get, here's the real question, the burning question, because it was Frank was the source of the story on how did you come up with the name Center for Internet Security?
Well, there were three co-conspirators actually in creating CIS. The third sadly passed away also some time ago, a gentleman on the National Security Council staff, who, by virtue of being on the National Security Council, couldn't be a publicly identified co-conspirator. It wasn't that it was unethical, but it was simply not career enhancing for him. His name was Jeffrey Hunker. And Alan and I met with Jeffrey after August 22nd and talked about, okay, so where do we take the energy that was created on August 22nd at Cosmos? And we addressed two questions. One was, who can run the thing? And to use a favorite New Jersey phrase, Alan, as usual, said, I know a guy. I got a guy. And that... and it was sort of this unlikely choice. This guy is now running the Seventh-day Adventist Hospital Center out of Tennessee, and this guy's name was Clint Kreitner, or as Tony refers to him, employee number one. And Clint, whose background we could spend the next hour talking about, was exactly the right choice. The other question is, what do we call this thing? And since we really didn't have a lot of bandwidth left, Jeffrey said, "My wife thinks you should call it the Center for Internet Security." And not being trained on Madison Avenue, and our creative juices had run out at that point. We said, "That sounds fine."
Good enough.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic. That's great. I had not heard that story, Tony. So that's fantastic. That's wonderful. Now, we did mention Alan Patler. I consider a force of nature, and he continues to be. His influence, his insight shaped the industry, many professionals around the world, many organizations. So, Ed, when we think of Alan bringing all of the people together, he convened people in order to create change and make a difference. Any thoughts there as you see CIS, SANS, and how we've all been working together?
Not a day goes by that I don't miss Alan Power. I think about him all the time. He actually helped. You mentioned large numbers of people, tens of thousands or 100,000 or more people, not only directly like me and Tony and you and such, but also indirectly through creation of things like Center for Internet Security and the SANS Institute. His legacy is multifaceted, but those are two big pillars in this thing that he built. I've served at SANS for 27 years now myself, and the thing that Alan did is he invested in people and creating processes and organizations. He was definitely an idea guy, and I think Tony actually said in the obituary in the New York Times, or maybe it was the Washington Post, because he had an obituary in each, that Alan Paller had more ideas before breakfast than most people get in a year or whatever it was. And then I think Tony added, and some of them were good ideas. So Tony, I think that's the quote that you had, and it's true. And that's the thing. Alan, he had so many ideas, just things that still exist today. Center for Internet Security, the SANS Institute, training institute associated with cybersecurity, the SANS College, sans.edu. He would often come to me with these ideas, and I've told people this before. I'm sure he did it to you too, Tony, and maybe you too, Frank. He would bounce. He had this little bounce to him when he had a good idea, and he'd bounce up to me, Ed, I've got an idea. What is it? We're going to make a college. Why are we making a college? Because then you can really impact people's career more than you can with a single class, and we can build leaders and this and that. Or like the Difference Maker Awards. We have Tony Sager, Mr. Difference Maker himself. He bounced up to me. We're going to do an award ceremony. Alan, why are we doing that? Because we want to reward the people that are doing really good things, put a spotlight on them. And he's just this boundless force of energy and ideas. And he was truly a great man. And I don't say that often about people, but he really was, and I miss him. And, as to his legacy, we do our best to uphold it. But I often wonder, are we thinking too small? I often think, what would Alan do here? I want to kind of get that feel and put myself in his shoes so I could kind of think, what would Alan do? Or put Alan in my shoes. What should I do that would properly honor Alan's legacy, his energy, his excitement, and his ideas? And we do our best, but sometimes I find myself and I find others, it's like, we're not living up to Alan's legacy enough. We got to work harder at that. Yeah.
Now, everybody has a good Alan story, at least. Tony, I don't know if there's one you would want to share with our audience.
There's just too many. But to echo what Ed said, I mean, the idea of he had this sort of, I had some word for it when he passed, but this sort of audacious ideas, right? I mean, he just thought really big and was a natural kind of integrator of both ideas and people. And, and folks like Ed and I, we would proudly say we're Alan people. By the way, and I remember talking to the SANS leadership after Alan was gone, and I said, did SANS have an advisory board? Because the impression I had was there was a big advisory board for SANS, but none of us ever met in the same room at the same time. Alan would bounce ideas off of Ed or me, or, I could name 24 other people that were all contributors. And he had this sort of natural gift for bringing things together. And as I said, he what I actually said after Alan passed was, yeah, he didn't bat 1,000, but his batting average was well into the Hall of Fame category, because there would be 10 things going, and his way of bouncing an idea off Ed brought something new to it, some refinement. And then if he talked to me, he got some different view from maybe a government background or whatever. And so being able to pull off together. But I mean, what I was always astounded by was the ability to maintain so many parallel relationships and conversations that all, I'm assuming there was a master plan somewhere, but I never saw it. I knew my part, but I never really saw a part of it. I know, Frank, you had that also, right? Alan was like, wow, there's so much going on in there. And in any given moment, he could shift from deep technical to heavy business to sort of political, social implications and back again.
Yeah, wonderful.
And I would add, Ed, I think the expression that comes to mind, everything that needs to be said has been said, but not everybody who wants to say it has said it.
I learned that expression from Alan, actually.
Yeah. Me too.
At the risk of repeating it, I mean, a lot of us, Jane Lute in particular comes to mind, when we're looking at an issue, we ask, what would Alan think? Question a lot. And my wife had an interesting description of Alan that captures it. He collected brains. He also knew our limitations. He knew whom to call on given the nature of the problem. And the third piece that I think is terribly important, he was prepared to fail. He was prepared to invest in an idea until it became apparent that for one reason or another, it wasn't viable. And unlike a lot of leaders, he didn't play the blame game. In fact, I remember having said to him many times when he introduced me, he gave us far more credit than we deserved, or at least in my case, I can say that, and never pointed a finger when one of our initiatives went haywire.
Was it Ed? You said someone once said, "Is there a bigger thrill in this industry than to be introduced by Alan on stage?"
So true.
Because it was like, who? What? Who's he talking about?
I'm telling you, it's so true.
Exactly.
It's wonderful. I've tried to mimic that too when I introduce like the SANS panel at RSA each year, and it's actually hard to do because you want it to be great and over the top, but still real, right? And
exactly.
He was the best introducer. Sure. There's one other little story if I could squeeze it in.
Okay.
For those who knew Alan, when he'd want to reach out to people to talk to them about things, he would send you an email. And he would never just like outright call, at least not me. He would never pick up the phone call. He would send me an email where the body of the email was empty. And the subject line would be very long, and it would be, "Hey, please give me a call when you get a chance. My phone number is this," as though I didn't know his phone number. "And here's what I want to talk about." It was all in this long subject line. And of course, you drop everything and you call Alan back. But he was so kind of humble about this. "I don't want to bother you. I know you're busy." He put that in the subject line too. "But when you get a chance, call me at my number." And that was just, it was exciting when you get an email from Alan with just a subject line saying, "Just give me a call." But he put this elaborate thing in there. Oh, it was endearing.
But last thought, I think it's reflected in CIS and sort of philosophically, that what he saw was, the way we've kind of defined this industry implicitly is that everyone needs to defend their little hunk of the enterprise. They need to defend themselves. Everyone needs to figure out how to configure stuff, manage it better, and patch it, and do all that kind of stuff. Alan was always looking for wait a minute. The way I embodied it in our work is, we all have more in common than different. So let's act like it, right? Let's find solutions in common. If I have this problem, you have this problem, and you have this problem. And so why would we all go off in our own direction? Why don't we put our heads together, put the best brains together, figure out how to operate this technology, how to run things, how to manage things, how to compose things in a way that gives us better security? And, that is so hard to pull off, to get people to consensus. And that was the gift, I thought, that he could craft a vision that we would all work towards, right? And it's not a flowery, bumper sticker thing, but a real concrete thing. So Frank gave the example of, okay, now we had an idea. Who are we going to hire? Who could actually execute this, right? What would be the business model for it? And, we'll run it until it fails. And then if that doesn't work, we'll figure out why it failed and we'll do it, we'll try round 2 in a different way, making up for those failures. And I think that scope of thinking, right? That sort of system level and being able to, pull communities together around a common idea and really execute. I thought that's extraordinary and very inspiring to us. Again, we try to embody that philosophically at CIS, right? That's inherent in our work, which is, don't do this by yourself. We've got, we all have this problem. Let's figure out how to share.
That's right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the those elements, Tony, some of the industry standards that we're giving away for free, some of the elements of why we call this the dawn of a new era. We've got a very special announcement at the end of this episode, and so I'm hoping everybody comes back after this break and gets to hear this huge announcement with respect to the podcast. But with that, we'll be right back. Tony, cloud security is like setting up a new home security system.
You have responsibilities like setting up alarms and locking certain doors.
But unlike a home security system, cloud security doesn't come with a manual.
No, you don't have a definitive guide to what you need to harden in your cloud environments or how.
There's got to be a better way.
Thankfully, there is. CIS hardened images. These virtual machine images come pre-hardened to the CIS benchmarks, providing built-in cloud security and compliance without any guesswork.
CIS hardened images are also available for just cents per compute hour, saving you time and money managing your cloud security posture.
And all while using major cloud service platforms like AWS, Azure, GCP, and OCI.
Cost-effective cloud configurations, CIS hardened images are ready to go when you are.
Spin one up today by visiting cisecurity.org.
So, Tony, before the break, we were talking about some of Alan's approaches to the industry. You'd mentioned we all have more in common than we do differently, right? In terms of an underlying threat profile, security control requirements, things of that nature. And it's really led us down a path from an industrial standards perspective, the controls, the benchmarks, and we've really given those resources away for free. It is to give everybody a playing field in which to, where do I start? What do I do? That seems to have had and continues to have a huge impact in the industry. When we think of Alan in terms of, let's give it, provide these for free. Obviously, the controls were the SANS top 20. Now it's CIS in terms of the 18 controls of version 8.1. Is that emblematic of where Alan was thinking about in terms of providing these types of resources? And again, we're following that legacy and his impact.
Yeah, I mean, there was an underlying philosophy, right? This notion that we could help everybody improve dramatically by sharing ideas, creating content. So sharing ideas. There's a talk, I used to call it the talk that would get you fired inside the DC Beltway. And the title of the talk was Information Sharing is Overrated. So information sharing on its own is often seen as like the panacea, right? If we just within this sector, let's provide a legal framework, everyone will share so that they're legally protected. And the implicit model there is we'll all get smarter, we'll know how to defend ourselves, and hooray for us. Having observed it from the other end and the government end, right? Defenders are overwhelmed. So flooding their inboxes with yet more alerts, yet more indicators is not really very helpful. And I often describe our work as translators. How do I translate millions of data points of badness and flaws and adversary behavior into a much smaller number of positive, constructive things you could do about it without having to understand all the nuances there? Alan was really driven by the model of public health. I don't know if you knew this, but one of his children went to medical school. And why is Alan always talking about these med school things? Oh, I get it now. Well, because it's like public health. That is, we don't all understand things like disease transmission and virology and all that kind of stuff. We ask people to engage in behaviors that we hope reflect the best available science. Right, that science is translated into behavioral things, and so when I look at what we do, I think we're right in the spirit of that. And that's what the company was founded, as Frank said, on this benchmark, which is about a piece of IT. How do I configure it? What's the most effective way to manage it, and so forth. But the next step is about then how do I put things together? How to compose things, manage them, operate them? That's really where the controls come in. And all of those, right, the learning it takes, the knowledge to understand both the tech and the business use and the security can really be overwhelming. But the good news is we actually, again, have more in common. So by pulling things together, and not by just sharing, but by translating into specific prescriptive action, then you give people a chance, right? They know what to do. It doesn't solve world hunger or peace in our time, but I mean, again, in my experience, we're talking easily in the 80-20 rule of solutions, right? It's so far beyond what most people are doing today. It was really effective. So that basic notion, I think, underlied, Alan's thinking about this creation of content. So it's great to, hold hands, kumbaya, sing together, share some indicators. But at the end, you have to create the kind of content that can really be replicated, shared, built into commercial tools, embodied in standards, and all that kind of stuff. But one quick story, by the way, thinking of Frank, you mentioned Clint Kreitner, employee number one, and the need to find a business model. I remember in the first 6 months, Clint came over to me and we were chatting, and he goes, and he had a real career, right? Beforehand, Frank, you hinted that. He once said to me, Tony, I've never run a business where we give our best product away for free. I'm not sure I can make this work. And sure enough, but he did. Clint was amazing. And again, there couldn't have been a better employee number one. But the model was community labor, create content, give it away, but through a licensing membership model, fund the nonprofit, right? To get the best value from free labor, you need a professional infrastructure. That's what CIS is, right? It provides the machinery that brings people together, the roadmap, the dealing with the vendors, the publication, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that mix of both the technology, the right answer, with the business that's sustainable, right? That didn't have to be very big, was really the gift that, between folks like Frank Allen, you mentioned Jeffrey Hunker, Clint Kreitner. I mean, the debt that the community owes, to the first handful of people involved is just really amazing to me. And I think something I'm eternally grateful for. And, as I dug through the history of this, I go, my gosh, what good people were involved in this.
Tony's correctly identified, I think, as he invariably does, what I think inspired Alan, or at least the model that he was looking at, and that was the public health model. And he articulated an interesting assumption that I hadn't thought about before. He said, if you can create a mechanism in which the experts who invariably are interested in sharing the model, their knowledge, can talk to one another. We can't do something that's proprietary. We can't, for example, in its early years, CIS would not accept any funding or resources from products that it was developing benchmarks for. The sequence for rolling out benchmarks was based on what the market was telling us were the predominant devices or systems used in that sector. So, for example, the first benchmark was the Solaris operating system. Not because we had a deal with Sun, but because that was the predominant operating system for that set of technology. And so there was a basic assumption here that if you created a trusted, neutral platform, they will come. And that is exactly what happened. Folks were happy to have their knowledge shared, and didn't see it as contributing to one, if you will, side, whether or another. And I would argue that continues to be CIS's secret sauce, that it is a neutral venue. And so part of going back to Ed's earlier comment, when we ask what would Alan think question, part of it is, will it allow us to continue to maintain this kind of intellectual independence and integrity.
That's fantastic. Well, I really think, leaning again into the mission and everything that was discussed and evolved over the last few decades that, CIS has been in existence is it's a changing environment, but we've maintained that same approach to security, to advocacy, to providing value back to the community in spades. I mean, we continue to do that. And Frank, just a side question here is, as you've seen the organization grow and that mission evolve with the organization, does it still hit the intent of when CIS was created in that initial sessions that you had at the Cosmos Club and how it's evolved? Any thoughts there?
And I'll defer to others who have a more contemporary sense of where CIS is today. Parkinson wrote about it better than I could articulate. There is the challenge of managing growth so that we don't end up with succumbing to goal displacement. That is, where the health of the organization rather than the mission becomes the driving force. I mean, clearly, as I learned when we did the rounds early on, and someone advised me, if you're going to set up a not-for-profit, keep in mind, not-for-profits also have to be not for loss. Yes. Or 501c is a tax classification, not a business model. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, clearly, I don't mean to be a Pollyanna. We have to think in terms of the business viability of the enterprise. Yep. But the constant challenge as an organization grows is that it not turn inward, yep, but continue to ask the Ed Skoudis question, what would Alan do?
Very good. That's excellent. And Tony, Ed, as we now head into, let's say, the next chapter, the next 25 years of CIS, Tony, what does success look like to you in terms of the organization and what we've got to accomplish as we move forward?
Yeah, I think Frank alluded to what he called secret sauce, and Ed also talked about the role. I'm a very fast approaching 50 years in this business, and it really is an honor to have this be my second career. And it's not just because I'm here, but I think the role that we play, the attributes that Frank talked about, the vision that Ed shared about Alan, CIS plays a unique role in this ecosystem. This sort of mix of save the world and be a successful business. And we have to do both, right? The platform allows us, it's the mission, the money, the phrase I've been using is money is necessary, but money is the means to our mission. It's not the mission, right? It's not about enriching stakeholders. It's not about financial success. Money allows us to have the platform that allows us to create great change. And even with this commercial business, I often spoke of Alan's, the way I observed him was SANS was, yes, it's a successful business, but it was his platform for activism. It was the place from which he could project ideas, cause change, right? Both ideas, financially, politically, et cetera. And so whatever, technology, though, is changing rapidly. So wherever it goes, right, we are very conscious of that we may have this sort of philosophical model of the role that we play, but we have to be constantly aware of the changing technology and the way business uses it. Because what we really create, we don't create technical information that other people cannot create, right? Any of the big vendors can hire the same talent even and pay them vastly more than we can. The question is, what is the role of that independence that Frank mentioned? This trustworthiness, right? That question 3, who can I trust to independently give me the best available advice, to bring together the best brains and create guidance, create content? That content may look different. For example, it became different from everybody composing standalone boxes to we're all on the network, to we're all in the mobile devices now, and now we're in the cloud, and now we're AIing everything. So the technology is moving, and for an old guy like me, that means, where do I make security decisions? That's what I'm always looking for, right? In your job, Sean, as a CISO, where are security decisions made? Somewhere in there is a place for informed, neutral, independent, trustworthy behavior, right? A place to gather people to decide, because these are complex, changing things. So that's what I'm, that's my sort of philosophical candle in the window, right? Where do you make decisions? Somewhere in there is where we need to be looking for our role. Again, that, and also means that parts of our business model can evaporate because it's less relevant, right? Are people really tinkering with individual boxes, down at the lowest level, or is the abstraction, that security decisions are made elsewhere, or are they all transitory? They're moving all the time, right? Well, how does that feel? So I grew up in a really static by today's standards, the static technology world. So that's what I think is important for us to do, is to have enough foresight to kind of navigate and find that place for us. And one of the beauties of being a nonprofit is that the line I've used with our team is that the key to our future is the ability to identify and manage complicated partnerships, because we're a flea in the back of the giant technology marketplace, right? We're not going to, not scooping up thousands of brilliant researchers, but as a neutral independent, you can have lots of friends, lots of partners, and all of them have a piece of the future. None of them control the future either. So your ability to sort of navigate among the giants, understand where things are going, and find our place where they can see value in us and we can add value to them is a really important thing. So there's a mix of technology, but also business strategy to get us to where we want to be. But it's all, Alan really kind of helped us think about this in the early days.
And given the changes we're seeing in the industry and how fast everything's moving, as you mentioned, Tony, I think the mission of CIS is more vital now, really, than it's ever been. And I'm not just saying that. there is need for bringing these things together with a high integrity, neutral organization that has lots of friends, a good, solid, standing voice, well respected in the industry. I look back over the last 25 years of my interactions with CIS. Those configuration guides have been so important. My team actually wrote one of them. It was for configuration of a VMware server back in the day, or the critical controls that that has been so useful to so many people. And I had the honor of being involved with. Tony took the first cut at it, and then I worked on adapting that. And then I've used it, in my career to help people secure themselves. But now with AI changing everything so fast, it's great to have CIS as this institution that people can trust and look to help sort out complex issues through this podcast, but also through all the other great work that CIS does.
Wonderful. This has been a longer episode, but I mean, what a conversation. The dawn of the new era. And I did mention at the break that we had a big announcement. And so as part of our 200th episode celebration, we have the biggest announcement in the podcast history, as far as I'm concerned, is our newest co-host of the CIS podcast, Ed Skoudis. It's you've agreed. Thank you. Absolutely. Part of the team. And the question, what drew you to accept being a co-host of this podcast?
No pressure, by the way.
No pressure. Right.
First of all, you're old friends. I've known Tony for almost ever. I've known Sean for a decade plus, and I really enjoy working with you. I mean, there's just that genuine joy. But it's the mission of CIS and the mission of this podcast. And I was honored when you reached out to me about it. And I was ready. Let's start. It's like, well, let's wait till episode 200, and here we are. And for those who watch a little more carefully, you might have noticed I've been on the last 4 or 5 episodes. It's my training wheels, I suppose. So we're taking one of the training wheels off now or something. But I'm really excited, and the podcast is great. 200 episodes, and I'd listen to them and get insights and ideas. I was a guest on, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 episodes. But I love the show. I have many friends that listen to it, and you know who you are because they're probably listening to this one. And I think we're going to have a great adventure. Let's do another 200 and see how it turns out.
Exactly.
Sounds good.
Exactly. Wonderful. Well, that draws us to the end. The celebration of 200. CIS, Frank, Tony, Ed. An absolute pleasure to learn about the history and understand where we are today and and where we'll be tomorrow. So thank you all very much. And thank you to our audience. Remember to subscribe in all the usual ways with your preferred podcast provider. Catch us on YouTube at the CI Security. If you have a question, comment, email us at podcast@cisecurity.org. And with that, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the show today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
In the meantime, visit our website at cisecurity.org.
And drop us a line at podcast@cisecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.